Hello, and welcome to the world of book reviews. I'm Judy Morio, the host, and tonight we have a wonderful guest, Mr. Eric Culberson. Eric, welcome. And Eric is the author of this book, The Competency Myth. And so we're going to be talking about his book this evening. But before we do that, I'd just like to say a word of thank you to our sponsors, skinfitness.com and EV36 Photography and Sky Vista Consulting. So thank you to our wonderful sponsors. Eric, thank you for being here tonight.
Well, thank you, Judy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good. I like your subtitle, Why Your Technical Skills Are No Longer Enough and What You Can Do About It. So was this book written specifically for technical people?
No, primarily for technical people, but certainly not only for technical people. What the book is really about is the change in the workplace. It's been happening ever since the Great Recession. And even though that seems like a while back at this stage, those changes that took place are still affecting us. And they've actually created a completely different dynamic. So no, it's really not just for technical professionals. It really talks about the broader changes that are affecting everyone.
But I like your comment, why your technical skills are no longer enough. So why are they no longer enough?
They're no longer enough because today companies want engineers and other really scientific professionals who can do more than just bits, bytes, data. Mm-hmm. Because companies are inherently smaller today. And for that reason, they need engineers that can actually communicate across the board to collaborative groups, to management, to shareholders, to investors, to other people that have an interest in what that particular company is doing. And what makes this message so important is that before, they wouldn't have had to do that. They would have just been comfortable doing their engineering role within the organization. But today, because companies are smaller, it makes more sense to have a work pool that's basically multidimensional. Mm-hmm. You don't want and you really can't afford to have people that are just purely technical unless they're so good and they're so technical to where you just leave them alone. But that's really not the corporate mandate. And what you look at when you look at the workplace today, you see companies are actually creating a different culture. Mm-hmm. They want a higher level of communication, collaboration, interface. So that means that for technical professionals like myself and for engineers especially, we have to be more engaging.
Yeah, I think for all of us in this day and age, we really need to work on our communication skills, don't we? Because the more and better we can communicate with people, the more we can get done, the less stress we're going to have in our lives.
Well, absolutely. But if we think about it in terms of the workplace, that higher degree of communication drives innovation. And because companies today are in an increasingly more competitive environment, there's competition from every corner of the globe. So only those companies that are able to develop products faster and bring them to market faster are going to ultimately be successful in their particular marketplace.
Right.
So once again, it all comes back to communication. And the companies that have the best internal networks for communication, collaboration, across the board interface are the companies that ultimately drive that innovation and are more successful. But you bring up a really good point, which is that communication takes us beyond the workplace. The better we are, the better our relationships are, the better our overall experience is, the better our opportunities are. And that's something that a lot of engineering professionals have simply neglected or simply not been aware of. And more importantly, they simply have not been comfortable with it. I mean, we just have a whole legacy of engineers not being comfortable in a social setting.
Yeah.
And so it just reinforces itself.
Yes, it does. But you know, I people don't know this about me, but there was a time in my life where I wasn't a very good communicator either. I was very uncomfortable in social situations. So I think people from all walks of life have that problem at one time or another. And as I read your book, I thought it would be good for just about anyone, not engineers necessarily, but for anyone that wanted to improve their communication skills and their leadership skills. There was a lot in your book about leadership.
Correct. In fact, there are really three primary tenets that I'm talking about here. One being communication, the other being leadership, and the other being just plain creativity. But all those really combine to make us more rounded, to give us more opportunities, to make our lives better and the lives of the people around us better. And just a little bit of effort, just a little bit of focus in this area can yield tremendous results. And again, it's one of those things where, as the old saying goes, you can't miss what you've never had.
Yes.
So for a lot of engineers, because we're so used to just focusing on technical things and only being in a technical environment, we don't know that there's a much broader world of interface, opportunities, experiences that can be had. And the people that are part of our lives, the people that love us and care for us, they're really wanting and craving that greater level of communication, access, and interface with us. And if we can just do that a little bit better, then it opens up so many doors for us.
Oh, I would definitely think so. I definitely think so. One of the other things that I saw in the book was that you ask about nurturing your tolerance for risk taking. And I just wanted you to touch on that a little bit. What did you mean by nurturing tolerance for risk taking?
As technical professionals, we typically like what can be proved in the lab. And when it comes to our own level of risk taking, we keep that at a minimum. And one of the key things about that, and why I made the point in the book, is that for engineers to ultimately be more expressive, to be more open, to be more engaging, that means that they have to be willing to take the risk. Because ultimately that's really what keeps us safe, is keeping to ourselves and not being engaging, and therefore not putting ourselves at risk that someone's gonna not like us, or someone's gonna think that we're weird or whatever.
Or a crazy scientist or something.
So I think that for engineers to ultimately really master this, or to just be better at it, it's going to take a certain amount of risk taking. You just have to put some skin in the game. You have to be more willing to just be accessible, open, engaged. And that's not an easy thing to do if you're not used to it.
Not easy, exactly. That's why in the Book of Lists, they say the number one fear that most people have is the fear of public speaking, and the number two fear is the fear of going to social events and having to talk one-on-one to other people. And and so both of those have to do with putting ourselves out there.
Right.
And so if you don't put yourself out there, you don't have risk, right?
Exactly.
So
but it's like protecting yourself, and that's what we do. I mean, all of us do that to a certain extent, but again, engineers, technical professionals, we do it more so because we're comfortable with data, we're comfortable with engaging in a technical environment, but just being social, where it's about us, it's about who we are, and actually having people like and approve us, that's not nearly as easy to do.
Yeah. This is Eric's book, The Competence Myth. Did I say it correctly?
Correct.
Get a copy of this and read it. It's very, very good. It's got a lot of good ideas on how to communicate better with those people we love, as well as with those people that we work. Eric's going to be with me on the next segment, so stay with us. And thank you, Eric, for being here tonight. And we will be talking more with Eric Culberson in just a moment. Thank you.